Next off, we have Eric Thiel, who's the global head of developer experience at Cisco. And yeah, why won't you, Eric, jump on the stage and we'll let you at it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Hey, everyone. I'm glad you were able to join us today. I am Eric Thiel. I lead developer experience for Cisco. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about full stack developer experience and how we approach trying to build a great community by having an open and easy to access platform. Now, when I say platform, I should, in full disclosure, point out Cisco actually has a lot of platforms we work with. We actually have hundreds of different APIs that my team helps support. So we actually have used the same process across a lot of different technologies, a lot of different solutions. So hopefully it'll provide some great insights for you all as to how we've been able to foster that community and make sure that developers that are using our platforms can be successful. At the end of the day, it all comes back to trust. We want to make sure that developers understand that we have a great platform that they can work with, and we are here to help make them successful. If we can't do that, then we're not doing our jobs. So we want them to trust that we will help bring the right resources for that success. So these are the kind of key components that make up both my team and how we approach developer experience as a whole. And that's API experience, docs and resources, developer advocacy, and then community. And I'll talk through each of them in a little bit about how we've approached it and how we've used them to improve the overall experience of our platforms. First off, API experience. For me, you've got to start with a solid foundation. And if your API is difficult to use or not well built, you're going to really struggle with adoption. People are not going to enjoy using your platform, and it's not going to lead to a great experience. Governance ends up being very critical for this process because we have these sets of guidelines. We want to actually make sure, especially in an organization of our size, that not only do we define what those best practices are, but we put together a set of policies and procedures to help people embrace them. And this becomes important because, at least for us, we have not only a set of products and solutions that have existed for many, many years, but we have a lot of new projects being incubated internally, and we have a lot of acquisitions coming in. And we need to be able to actually have consistent APIs across all of those. So we needed to lay out not just the guidelines, but how groups can approach it and how they might actually gradually transition into those guidelines. So some of the challenges that we've encountered along the way, measuring quality can be tricky. It's a very subjective thing. Is this a good API? Is it a bad API? But what we did is we defined a set of those guidelines as priority 0, priority 1, the most critical. And so for business units, we can share the benchmark of what percentage of those P0 and P1s are meeting the expectation. And so we can give them very easy to measure percentage. And we set a benchmark of 80%, saying if your API is below 80%, it's struggling to be a great experience. We know 100% is going to be very tough to attain and will take time, but we really want to see people at least at 80%. Next is awareness. I mentioned, we've got a lot of different groups building, innovating, acquiring. So we've done things like we have an internal methodology called Cisco Product Development Methodology, which has tooling for any new product that's coming out. And it shows them all of the rules, all the guidelines, everything they need to do as part of their process. And so by being as part of that, we've been able to get visibility on it early on in the development process. And developers know these are the guidelines I should be looking at and evaluating as I'm developing my API. Next is adoption. It's tough. Engineering groups don't have a ton of resources usually to throw at APIs, so it's tough to get full adoption of things like our guidelines. So we've had teams that have actually built it into their pipeline process where they can actually evaluate programmatically a lot of those guidelines and figure out, are they compliant at build time, so that it makes it less friction for the developers, but they can still have awareness of if they're meeting those or not. And then lastly is prioritization. Again, I know engineering teams tend to be very starved for resources, and APIs aren't necessarily always the first thing worked on. So we've built relationships across our engineering executive leadership team, and we have them now on board. They understand the importance and the value of APIs, and we are we're working with folks within their team, champions, that are actually helping us free up the resources or identify the resources to help them be successful. So ultimately, what we're trying to do with all of these API experience initiatives are building trustworthy APIs and helping make sure developers can be successful. And so I just listed the kind of high-level bullets of what things we're looking at as those holistic guidelines. And it's things like, are you treating your API as a product itself, or is it just an afterthought? Do you have great API documentation and resources and support? And when you approach design and versioning, are you thinking about it from a user perspective, from a developer perspective? And as we go through all of these, really ultimately comes down to the people that we're working with. I mentioned we brought all of them together from all of the different engineering orgs because we know we don't have all the answers, but getting the insight from people that have been doing it across all of those different products helps us make sure we have the best possible set of guidelines to provide to the business. And I'll give an example where working with one of those teams now, we were able to get one API up by over 50% of compliance from where they started to when they actually shipped, just by having a focus group working together and really driving the outcomes that were necessary to make sure that that API, when it launched, had a great experience. So now you've got a great API, but what next? If you don't have great docs and resources available to developers, they're going to really struggle to adopt that API. So this is another critical function. Within there, some of the challenges we've had is scale. We have hundreds of APIs we need to get documents published for. And so we've embraced docs as code and self-service as ways to help us scale. I'll talk on the next slide a little bit about what we mean by docs as code, but by helping make sure that things are treated, documentation is treated like software, it gets us very agile, very quick responsiveness, and allows those BUs to actually integrate us into their workflows rather than being a roadblock for them. Next is undocumented APIs. We all struggle with that, but especially if you have older products that maybe weren't as well documented, it's critical to have them well documented. So we've actually done a bunch of internal training for organizations about open API spec and how that can actually really help them with their overall goals of documenting their APIs. And then we've also done things like we actually launched an open source tool recently called API Clarity that helps map out, if you don't know all of the components of an API of an older product, you can actually integrate with either the API gateway or listen over the wire. And you can actually map out that API and help build some of that documentation on the fly as the product's in use. So we like that because it helps us get over the hurdle of groups that just don't know how their API works or don't have all the details. And this can really help get started in documenting it. And then incomplete resources. So again, every engineering group has different prioritization, but we want to make sure they have consistent sets of resources. So we worked with a lot of tooling, like for instance, our documentation is all automatically generated from OpenAPI spec docs, so that every BU just has to know if they produce that, they can not only get docs, but they could also potentially generate Postman collections or SDKs from those spec docs as well. And it gives them a very easy way to embrace getting the right resources out at the right time. So when we talk about docs as code, we're thinking about things like we have the BUs publish all of their documentation as if it's any other bit of code that they're publishing to us. So we do everything with pull requests. We open GitHub issues when there's issues within the documentation. And we have our own CI/CD pipeline for publishing those docs as we get new builds and as we get new submissions in. And so ultimately what we can do is we can work with the business units to make sure that they meet these, what we consider three key criteria: consistency, completeness, and usability. So consistency, we want all of those hundreds of APIs to look like they've come from a single voice, that the documentation is very consistent across. We want it to be complete because no one can work with an API successfully if it's not well documented and doesn't have all the right information to be successful. And usability. So we've integrated capabilities such as being able to actually do interactive API docs even on our website. So it can query things like sandboxes and get access to platforms to try things out while you're browsing the docs. And we find if a business unit has all of those things and it's working well, we're really in the sweet spot of having a great documentation experience. And I'll say that we actually have gotten to a point now of trust with all of our product groups that we actually have a floor and a benchmark of, if you aren't meeting these baseline standards, we won't actually publish your docs publicly. And that way we can work with them to provide them to limited access and allow them to see how they would look, but we work with them on how to improve them and get them up to our baseline standards so that when people do come and use them, they're satisfied and they aren't frustrated with the experience. So you've now got a great API and you've got great documentation behind it. To me, what's next is advocacy, getting the word out about that. And I'll talk about advocacy kind of has two different hats that they wear. Historically, a lot of people used to be known as developer evangelists instead of advocates. And that kind of represents the outward lens, which is getting the word out about your platforms, helping people understand what they can build with it, how they can be successful. And then the inward is taking the feedback from developers and bringing it to business units so they can actually understand how their platforms are being used. For challenges within advocacy, I've seen, I won't say it's necessarily a challenge, but I wanted to call it out. A lot of businesses struggle with where to even fit this. Is it marketing? Is it sales? Is it engineering? Is it go-to-market? What I'll say is, at the end of the day, it's not so significant where it gets placed in the organization. It's important that you make sure that they understand the needs and the goals that they're driving towards. And whatever organization advocacy lives in, it's ultimately serving the same purpose, but you might need to tweak how it aligns to the metrics of that organization. The next is scale. There are so many events, webcasts, blogs, meetups to participate in that it's impossible, even with a large advocacy team, to cover everything. And then at the same time, they still need to be experts on their technologies. They need to spend time in the lab trying things out and writing code. So what we've done is we've leveraged things like our system engineering organization, which is global and huge at Cisco, and also our partner organization, which is even bigger, to make sure we provide resources to them. And in turn, they can actually go out and do a lot of that outreach and gather that grassroots feedback from those meetups, from those conferences, and bring it back so that we can again improve the experience of that API and that product. And then lastly, early engagement. So our developer advocates strive to be developer zero on any of our technologies. So we get in early with the product groups and make sure that we're providing them with insights about how a developer might use that and where there might be struggles or opportunities to improve. So I already kind of talked about it, but evangelism, really outward facing. Get out in front, provide lots of context, provide lots of information, how-tos and code samples to make people very quickly successful, and train those ambassadors. Get other people out there helping get the word out. And then advocacy. This is really where we spend a lot of our time, is gathering all of that insight from community, listen to what they're complaining about, listen to what they're doing with the products, and bring it back to engineering and help prioritize enhancements and capabilities.
Hi, we are Eficode and we organize the DEVOPS Conference. We think that modern software development is about creating value as sustainably as possible by minimizing waste and risks. If you think the same, we'd love to speak to you and help you make it real. You can find us at eficode.com. The links are in the description, and have a great time with the DevOps Conference talks.
And so now you've got a great API, you've got great documentation, you've got a team of people out there talking about the product. You don't want to stop there. If you just go out and talk at a conference like this and tell people about a product, they might go and use it, but if they don't feel there's a place to go and talk to other people that find those kindred spirits that are also using it, you'll see a lot of drop off. So we have a community team that does things like manages our forums and our chat spaces and helps encourage people to share their wins, their challenges, their ideas, their inspirations. And by doing that, they're actually keeping that community vibrant and active. So it's not just a come here when you have a question. Don't make it transactional. Make it about building friends and finding those people across the industry that are using the same technologies and have cool ideas. And as an offshoot of that, one thing, if you're not already doing it, I encourage you all to consider having something like a Voice of the Developer program, where you can actually bring some of those voices in then and talk to your engineering orgs about how they're using the product and what they're struggling with or how they might benefit from different ways of approaching it. And lastly, one of the things we do within that community then is this community champion or MVP or ambassador concept, where we highlight the people that are most active in doing things like sharing their code or sharing things they've built, because that really helps give them a voice and it helps people see that it's not just you trying to sell something. This is people being successful using your platform. You want that to get out and you want to help amplify that voice so people get inspired and they maybe try it out themselves. So at the beginning, I kind of talked about it as a stack, as some building blocks. But as I talk through it more, I think really more how we should think about this is more of a developer experience virtuous cycle. Because at the end of the day, you don't stop with that community. That community is just a starting point where you bring in that insight back into your API experience efforts, improve your APIs, improve your platforms which will in turn drive more community engagement and more involvement, which will in turn, again, feed more feedback and great ways to improve your product. And this virtuous cycle ultimately ends up benefiting everyone because you make a better product, a better API, and you have a great community behind it that's building all kinds of cool innovation on top. So to me, that's where we've really gotten to, and we've gotten such a great community around a lot of our platforms that we're continuing to drive new innovation through it. And I think it's something that you should be doing as well with your platforms. And if you do, you're going to see a lot of payback and ROI from the investments you put in. So with that, I know we've got a little bit of time left, so I don't know if there were any questions that came through in chat. I will also be sticking around afterwards and answering in chat, and you have my social there as well if you want to reach out after. But if the hosts saw any coming through, please let me know, and I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, let's see. I think we don't have any questions in the chat at this moment. Maybe they'll be coming in shortly. But I wanted to sort of jump on a question immediately. And I understand Cisco is a huge company, and you, of course, have a lot of resources and have had sort of time to develop the whole process that you just went through. I was just wondering if there are any good tips for, let's say, smaller companies that are starting off with their, let's say, API development or want to build some sort of better advocacy programs within their company. Is there something that you recommend as let's say, low-bearing fruit?
Absolutely. So I think early on, I think from the API experience side, I would start small and start with those more holistic guidelines. Think about yourself as a developer, and it doesn't have to be a dedicated team. If you're a developer, an engineer building your APIs, just get a few of your peers together if you're a small organization and just sit down and talk about like what has really frustrated you when you've used other people's APIs. What are things that would make you not want to use a platform? So that's where a lot of those top level holistic ones come in of, if you don't do versioning right, you're going to scare away all your developers. We've seen it firsthand. We've had some struggles, in full transparency in the past with some solutions. And if you don't have a consistent way that you're handling something so basic as versioning or documentation or support, you're going to really struggle for that early adoption. And more we're seeing developers are the decision makers in buying process. So you really don't want to alienate them early on because they may never come back if they have that bad of an experience up front.
Exactly. So basically treat it like any sort of product development cycle and think about developers as, let's say, traditional users, and try to sort of engage them in those sort of classic ways.
Absolutely.
How about, Eric, would you like to share some sort of points on how you started measuring the developer experience, and how did you get going on with that one?
Absolutely. So I mentioned we started out by building at grassroots. So we had probably about, I think, 40 different contributing groups come together, and we ran a series of workshops. And we started just with what are the key areas? What are the key categories we care about? Security, design, authentication, a lot of different components. And then we actually did individual sessions for each of those breakouts where we said, if you are an expert on authentication, let's get together and talk about how we should do that consistently across all of our APIs. And, we had healthy discussions because a lot of people had a lot of perspectives, and we tried to find the best ways to say, not just it must be this way or nothing, but listening to the other voices and understanding, okay, based on where other people are coming from, what is the best path forward? So I think building that, and then once we had all of those defined, like I said, it came down to then we had that same group vote and say, which are the ones that are P0 and P1? Which ones are the most critical that without it, we think we will have a bad experience? And we just made that a percentage. Like, how many of those are you compliant with? And we feel, and we've gotten pretty good feedback, like 80% is a pretty solid threshold. There are going to be some that might take months or years to update. So we want to allow that. We don't want people to think that it's 100% or nothing, because we will alienate them and they'll get frustrated and not want to participate. But by having a reasonable threshold of compliance, everyone realizes that's attainable if they just put a little bit of effort into it.
Exactly. Very interesting. All right. We do have a couple of other questions here in the Q&A section, maybe getting more into the nitty-gritty technical aspects. We have a question from Thomas, who says, did you have any friction with SOAP REST? And if so, how did you deal with it?
So, like I mentioned, we have a lot of APIs from, some of them dating back over a decade now. So what I'll say is we've tried not to be so prescriptive that it doesn't allow flexibility. I think everyone at this point appreciates that that what we've laid out is the great end state. So rather than, come down on anyone, we do still have SOAP APIs out there. They're getting fewer and further between, but rather than say you are wrong for using this or you are bad because of it, we've instead worked to partner and understand what are the blockers, what is keeping them from potentially updating or getting to something more modern, and then making sure that their engineering leadership is aware and visible and understands that this will take some resources, it will take some time, but we're here to partner. We're not here to shame anyone or try and force anyone to change. And I think most of the groups, I can't think of any groups that have resisted and said, no, we don't want to update. We don't want to be a more modern setup.
Yeah, it's always good to sort of allow for users and sort of customers in this case to use the tools that they've been using, but then try to push them towards maybe a more modern mindset and approach, but still also just maintaining that what they're doing is still sort of relatively okay.
Sounds like a bit of using the psychology as well.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have one more question here. So it's from Stefan. Did you implement an API gateway? And if so, how important was that for your API journey?
Sure. So I'll refer back to one of my initial comments, which is keep in mind Cisco as a whole has hundreds of APIs. So there's not one answer to that question. With that said, we get this question from a lot of our engineering groups. And we do actually see a lot of them moving towards using API gateways. I think especially because a lot of our platforms end up being a lot of different discrete APIs behind the scenes, the API gateway allows us to have a bit more consistency in a single point of interaction. But we're also seeing things like when we're looking at tooling that we want to use, like API clarity that I alluded to, the ability for something like that to just plug into an API gateway actually gives us some extra capabilities that make it worth considering. At the end of the day, there's going to be new technical nuances for every organization as to why that's really the right fit or not. So we try not to dictate and say you must or you must not. With something like that, it is a bit more opinionated. And we feel technically you can have a successful API with or without. But personally, I kind of like it because it gives us some extra visibility and abilities to integrate in that we wouldn't if they didn't use a gateway.
Exactly. Yeah. Keeping it agnostic is always a good approach. All right. I think we don't have any other questions at this point from the chat or the Q&A. So I'd, Eric, like to thank you for your very nice presentation.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being with us, Eric.